Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, energy poverty in Atlantic Canada is nearly 40%, the highest in the country. Newfoundland and Labrador's Liberal Premier is begging the Prime Minister not to put carbon tax on home heating fuel. It will drive up heating costs by 20%. Winter is coming. Seniors will need to choose between food on the table or a warm home. Will the government pledge to cancel its planned tax hikes on my province's workers and seniors? Pledge today.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, our government understands the affordability concerns faced by Atlantic Canadians, which is why the federal system is designed to put money back in the pockets of families. If the federal system is applied in the province of Newfoundland, of Nova Scotia, we will ensure that they receive the climate action incentive payments via quarterly checks, which, Mr. Speaker, will be in the mail in October. We remain committed to working in a collaborative, productive way with provincial counterparts to fight climate change while making life more affordable for Canadian families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Coast of Bay Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, Corey from Gander and many more like him aren't too impressed with that answer. Does this minister get it? Last year, Corey spent $4,000 on oil to heat his home. The Liberal carbon tax will add $700 to his annual heating bill. Corey considers himself middle class. But with these inflationary tax increases, he's worried about paying his bills. Again, I ask on behalf of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and many of them voted for this Prime Minister, will he choose not to hurt them and cancel these planned tax hikes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we hear Canadians in Atlantic Canada and the issues that they have raised with respect to the cost of oil heating, which is in fact why just last week we announced a special program for Atlantic Canada in particular to help them transition from oil to renewable energies, to have cleaner, cheaper ways to heat their homes. We're there to support Canadians. We're there to support Atlantic Canadians.
The Honourable Member for South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, that minister doesn't know that program only covers 3% of people in Atlantic Canada. What are the other 97% supposed to do? Nova Scotia has surpassed the 2030 carbon reduction emission targets and will reach net zero by 2050 without a carbon tax. Nova Scotia is getting results with technology, not taxes. But why let outcomes drive your policy when you can increase taxes? The carbon tax will add 14 cents more a litre to home heating fuel when 40% of Atlantic Canadians are experiencing energy poverty. Will the Liberals listen to Premier Houston, implement his plan and commit to not imposing the ineffective carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have been there consistently to support Canadians as we transition to more affordable forms of energy for our homes. And like I mentioned, just last week we had a program that highlighted supports for Atlantic Canada. But more than that, we are working with the provinces, including Nova Scotia, on the Atlantic Loop, ways that we can provide affordable, clean energy. We are there. We will continue working with our provinces, including Atlantic Canada specifically. We are focused on that.
Member for South Shore, St. Margaret's.
So obviously the motto of this government is fighting affordability. Atlantic premiers are not being listened to. They are beating your targets, but you won't listen. Why is it you won't listen to government? Is it the government will they listen? Is it because this government just wants more tax revenue, more money in the bank to spend on useless programs? When will they commit to not increasing taxes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member won't believe me, perhaps he'll believe the Parliamentary Budget Officer, perhaps he'll believe the Commissioner on Environment and Sustainable Development. And the reality, Mr. Speaker, is the price on pollution puts more money in people's pockets. 8 out of 10 families will receive more than they pay in through the climate action incentive.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, there's some folks right around my left ear here that I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm going to have to ask him to repeat Start from the top, please, so I can hear the whole answer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was just repeating what I said before. 8 out of 10 families will be better off. Mr. Speaker, we're fighting climate change. We're delivering on affordability in so many ways, as our Minister of Tourism has highlighted many, many times today. Mr. Speaker, surely the Conservative Party doesn't want to take money out of people's pockets. And Mr. Speaker, a family of 4 once again will receive $745 in Ontario, $830 in Manitoba, and about $1,100 each in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. That's real money, Mr. Speaker, that is going to help with affordability.
For Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the ever-increasing Liberal carbon tax, I'm receiving messages from Canadians across this country wondering how they're going to heat their homes and eat this winter. And now the Liberals are coming after workers' paychecks with CPP and EI increases. Canadians cannot afford this government taking any more of their money. They are desperate for relief from this high-tax Liberal agenda. Mr. Speaker, it is a simple choice. Will the Liberals continue to punish hard-working Canadians, or will they finally stop inflicting the pain and cancel their tax hikes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've all heard the Leader of the Opposition calls for freedom. Mr. Speaker, I hope the Honourable Member of the Opposition didn't mean the freedom to pollute. And while Conservatives want to make pollution free again, Mr. Speaker, again, we're reducing pollution, we're putting more monies in people's pocket, we're creating the clean economy and good, clean jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honorable député de Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, this Prime Minister's policies has been hurting Canadians' pocketbooks. Currently, we're seeing the tax credit for children's sports activities being eliminated. While raising other taxes, he also promised that he would reduce rates on student loans, but now he's going to increase them. Can this Prime Minister promise not to increase taxes? The Honourable Minister of Family. Mr. Speaker, this year we signed 13 agreements with all the provinces and territories to reduce child care costs. That's thousands of dollars that will go back to parents' pockets to ensure that they can provide their children with what they need and to ensure that they can keep up with the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, we are focusing on families, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, even before the pandemic, this Prime Minister spent more than any other Prime Minister in the history of Canada. His out-of-control spending has led to roaring inflation, and now Canadians are paying exorbitant prices for goods and services. And now the Prime Minister will make it worse by hiking the carbon tax. This is going to hurt families who dream of buying a house one day. Will the Prime Minister promise to pause tax hikes? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, today in this very House, we tabled 2 bills which will make the cost of living more affordable for Canadians. The dental care plan and an increase in housing benefits, as well as doubling the GST credit. In addition to all the measures in Budget 2022, we are here to support Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we will continue to do.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are already struggling to keep up with record-high cost of living expenses caused by this government's out-of-control spending, high-risk economic policies, and painful interest rate hikes. Many are forced to use credit cards and take out loans just to pay their bills and feed their families. In fact, new CPI data shows that grocery prices have risen by over 10%. That's a 40-year high. Canadians can't afford these Liberals' risky economic policies. Will the government commit to cancelling their planned tax hikes on Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's be really clear. The riskiest advice that anybody in the House of Commons has given Canadians over the last 6 weeks is putting their money into Bitcoin. Had Canadians done that, they would have lost their shirts. They would have destroyed their own personal finances. So our plan, Mr. Speaker, is a real plan that will help make life more affordable. $1,160 for single mothers, $700 for single seniors, $1,401 for couples with 2 children, and that's just the GST tax increase we're talking about, the credit for Canadians. That side can support us and do right by Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 600,000 Quebecers use food banks in Quebec to feed themselves because they can't make ends meet. And amongst them, more and more workers, Mr. Speaker. The price increases everywhere cause inflation, and workers cannot deal with this. Groceries have gone up by more than 10%. Will the Prime Minister finally commit to granting more money into people's pockets by ending all these new tax increases, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the supports that we have proposed starting today do exactly what the member opposite is talking about, putting money in the pockets of those who need it the most, whilst at the same time we have been working on inflation. Economists from coast to coast to coast have all said that our measures will not increase inflation. We are fighting for Canadians, supporting those who need it, while being fiscally prudent. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. I would like to explain to my colleague what making ends meet means. It means having enough to survive to the next harvest season. Now it just means living from paycheck to paycheck. That's what it means today. But unfortunately, fewer and fewer Canadians manage to survive from paycheck to paycheck. Inflation, food, taxes, rent, gas, everything's more expensive. Instead of stressing Canadians out, can the Prime Minister at least stop implementing new measures that increase every price everywhere once again? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, generally speaking, the measures that we have mentioned today and the measures in Budget 2022 are targeted to help Canadians who need it the most. With the dental plan, a $70,000 family will receive $650. Youth who are in a family that earns $70,000 to $90,000 will also receive a significant amount. Mr. Speaker, that is real money in Canadians' pockets. The Honourable Member from Montmagny-Lille-Kamouraska-Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, Stats Canada has informed us that inflation is still north of 7%. Do you know why, Mr. Speaker? This government's failures and its incomprehension of how economics work. So long as this Liberal NDP coalition exists, Canadians and Quebecers will suffer from this inflation. Will the Liberals at least commit to cancelling tax increases? If not, then why? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, these measures will not increase inflation. It will support those who require it. We are targeting Canadians who are in greatest need. Trevor, an economist, clearly stated that global factors and the Government of Canada's incidents will not have a big effect. These are economists saying this. They are saying that our plan is a prudent plan with regards to budgets and fiscality.
The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of Liberal inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. Inflation is running at historic highs and taking a massive bite out of Canadians' ability to pay the bills. Now, if you thought it couldn't get much worse, you'd be wrong, because the Liberals are planning on raising taxes on Canadians' paychecks by hiking CPP and EI premiums. Instead of making the problem worse, will the government commit to cancelling its planned tax hikes and cancel its tripling of the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're a bit hesitant to take advice from that side on EI, considering that the leader of the opposition, when he was in charge of EI in 2015, let's say the current leader, when he was in charge of EI in 2015, workers paid 20% more into EI than they do today, in a system that wasn't as generous as it is today.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the new measures proposed by the government will just get vaporized by continued sustained inflation. It's the cost of government that's driving up the cost of living. Food is up 10% year over year, and 4 out of 10 Canadians are cutting their diets because of rising food costs. Canadians who have never used a food bank in their lives before are being forced to because they simply can't keep up with soaring prices. Canadians are struggling to get by, and the government plans to raise taxes on gas, home heating, groceries, and paychecks. Will the government reverse its planned tax hikes and commit to no new taxes?
The Honourable Minister for Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what was vaporized. Canadian savings when they followed the new Conservative leader's advice to go put money into Bitcoin. Quite frankly, shameful, irresponsible, and reckless.
Member for Regina Capel.
What's been vaporized is Canadians' purchasing power, as this government has caused the record-breaking inflation that is hammering Canadians' abilities to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker. The best way to stop inflation is to put an end to the deficits that caused it in the first place. Instead, the Liberals are going to make the problem a whole lot worse. Rising prices have robbed Canadians of the ability to heat their homes and fill their fridges. And in the coming new year, the government is planning on hiking payroll taxes and carbon taxes, meaning Canadians will have to spend more as they take home less. Will the government simply cancel their planned tax hikes?
The Honourable Minister.
Let's go through the numbers through the years. In 2015, when we lowered income taxes on Canadians, that member and that bench voted against. In 2019, when we lowered taxes for Canadians, again, the Conservative leader and that bench voted against. In 2021, when we lowered taxes for working Canadians, that side of the aisle voted against. And even this summer, when we reduced taxes on businesses, once again, the Conservatives in this House voted against taxes. We know who has the record on having Canadians' backs on taxes, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Chico-Jamila-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, for 2 years, Liberals are being informed about the dangers of inflation, but according to them, there was nothing to fear. But today, we are in a Liberal inflation maelstrom. Many Canadians are saying that they wouldn't be able to pay a surprise expenditure of $1,000. Many Canadians are scared about their debt level. Many Canadians have to choose between gas and food. Can the Liberals guarantee that they will not increase taxes? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, 4 times over the last 6 years, Conservatives have voted against tax cuts offered by the Liberals. Measures we've implemented our table today are targeted for Canadians who need it the most. These are targeted measures. We will add money for housing. We'll create a Canada dental plan. We will double the GST tax credit, real money in Canadians' pockets.
Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, small businesses will be among the hardest hit by planned Liberal tax hikes. First, the planned payroll tax increase forces them to pay more taxes on wages. Second, the Liberal plan to triple the carbon tax. While large industrial corporations don't pay the carbon tax at all, small businesses will see their energy costs skyrocket, forcing them to charge more to consumers and pay less to workers. Will the government cancel these new tax hikes so small businesses can survive?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, let me outline what we've done for small businesses during the past 2.5 years. We've supported small businesses throughout a pandemic. What we've also done, and a matter I'm sure the member opposite is very concerned about, is support small businesses in their inclusivity with the Women's Entrepreneurship Program. We've launched a Black Entrepreneurship Program. We're supporting Indigenous businesses. The Conservative record on supporting small businesses leaves a little bit to be desired. When we've proposed rebates for small businesses, they've opposed them in their voting record. When small businesses in this city were under siege by an illegal blockade, the man who's now the leader of the opposition supported that blockade and the impediments it caused to those small businesses. That's the Conservatives' record. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the 5th largest natural gas producer, but doesn't export any LNG. The world wants Canadian LNG, but these Liberal gatekeepers killed 16 projects, 100,000 jobs, and forced Canada to import. Worse, after this Prime Minister's snub, Germany may do a deal with Saudi Arabia instead. Canada could be the 6th largest LNG exporter if all the projects were built, and replace all Russian LNG to Europe, Japan, and South Korea. Why do these Liberals always export Canadian paychecks and projects to foreign dictators?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, last month we welcomed the German Chancellor to Canada. And you know what we are exporting? Hydrogen, critical minerals. And you know what we're creating right here at home? Good paying, sustainable jobs. We came, we had conversations with the Chancellor, we responded to what they need, and we will be there to support our allies while supporting Canadian jobs.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are already struggling to keep up with record-high cost of living expenses caused by this government's out-of-control spending, high-risk economic policies, and painful interest rate hikes. Many are forced to use credit cards and take out loans just to pay their bills and feed their families. In fact, new CPI data shows that grocery prices have risen by over 10%. That's a 40-year high. Canadians can't afford these Liberals' risky economic policies. Will the government commit to cancelling their planned tax hikes on Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's be really clear. The riskiest advice that anybody in the House of Commons has given Canadians over the last 6 weeks is it putting their money into Bitcoin. Had Canadians done that, they would have lost their shirts. They would have destroyed their own personal finances. So our plan, Mr. Speaker, is a real plan that will help make life more affordable. $1,160 for single mothers, $700 for single seniors, $1,401 for couples with 2 children, and that's just the GST tax increase we're talking about, the credit for Canadians. That side can support us and do right by Canadians.